Welcome to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge, a podcast for tech executives. We provide strategies and tactics to help executives succeed and further their career goals. With interviews from industry experts, leaders, and innovators, this show will surely get you on the edge of your seat with thought-provoking advice on how to stay ahead of the competition. Welcome to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge, a podcast that explores the latest trends, strategies, and insights in the technology leadership world. From emerging technologies to digital transformation and beyond, we will discuss the most important topics and ideas shaping the industry today. Join us to learn all of the juicy secrets of tech leaders, their biggest successes and failures on our quest for gaining that all-important technology edge. Are you ready? Let's get started. So today, my guest is David Fradin. David was classically trained as an HP product manager and was then recruited by Apple to bring the first hard disk drive on a PC to market, and later became the Apple business unit manager at the same level as Steve Jobs. He is the author of Building Insanely Great Products, Organizing and Managing Insanely Great Products, and the widely published Successful Product Design and Management, all available right now on Amazon. He has trained companies such as Cisco on these topics worldwide. His mission is to help products succeed. Welcome to the show, David.
Glad to be with you. Thanks.
So tell me about a little bit about your mission to help products succeed. It's an interesting statement.
Well, I cover that in detail in my books and in my courses and classes that I deliver, like at Cisco. And it's epitomized in the mnemonic of SPICE of my company, Spice Catalyst. The S stands for you must have a product market strategy. The P stands for process, a repeatable process so that you get better and better with each new product. And SPICE stands for have the right information available to make decisions. The C stands for understanding the customer, what the customer wants to do, and what things that your product can do to help your customer do what they want to do better, faster, or with higher quality, which is called innovation. And lastly, is your employees to make sure that they have the competencies or the skill sets for product success. And I've identified about 130 skill sets that an organization needs to have in order for their product or for their service to succeed.
So is this applicable to any type of product?
Any product and any service in any organization, for-profit, non-profit, government, charitable, whatever.
I think there's some people who aren't going to believe us, but I actually think that it makes sense because I'm a big process person. I think that the way you solve major problems in your business is by taking a look at what the heck you're doing and figure out maybe you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. Maybe you're not doing things you should be doing. I think it's interesting how many skill sets that you've identified for employees in order for this to go well. So why don't, I think it'd be interesting if we walked through that acronym a little bit, the strategy, process, information, customer, and employees. And so let's talk a little bit about what kind of strategies do you recommend for people who are attempting to put out a product to market?
Well, product market strategy or product market plan, the word strategy and plan mean the same thing, and they're interchangeable. And I should mention in 2014, a study was done and found that the world spent about $1.6 trillion on new product development, and roughly 40% of them fail. And that goes to the reasons why these 5 keys to product success are not being followed very well. So in the area of product market strategy, there are understanding your customer, what it is that they want to do, what's the problem that you're going to try to solve. Is there enough people or organizations that have that same problem? Then there's a tangible market that you can try to tap into. With that information in hand, you can then figure out the persona of your target customers, do your market research and your competitive research, and write your product positioning statement, which is used then throughout your marketing, which you do later. then figure out the how you're going to distribute it, the distribution channels, your pricing strategy, and your support and service plans. That is, then you hand that over to engineering or development, and now they know who they're building their product for and what it is that the product needs to do for the customer.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that would make market research a lot easier. I think a lot of times people go into market research blindly, so to speak. Like they misunderstand what market research is, and they think that they're supposed to go out there and like find out everything about the potential for the product without actually knowing anything about what they're intending to offer. I see that a lot. Then let's talk about the process. So what kind of process do you recommend for this?
Well, they teach in the MBA school that if you can repeat the process over and over again and improve upon your product development process, then you will have a greater product success. One of my clients developed 5 Wi-Fi devices targeted at the education and government markets, and all 5 of them failed. And they did not have a repeatable process, which I asked them about. As a result of that, the VP of product management said that the lack of a process developed a culture of blame. So everyone would point fingers at everybody else as to why the product failed. So the repeatable process might be something along the lines of going out and observing 40 prospective customers, 10, let's say 10 a week. This is what Procter and Gamble does for all of their products. And by the end of the month, you now have observations of 40 of your target customers. From that, you could then develop a interview form, which would then lead into a questionnaire. So with interviews, you would go out, maybe interview about 100 prospective customers, and then you would get maybe about 1,200 prospective customers that you would send a survey to and reward them to respond to the survey. So the combination of observing, interviewing, and then surveying lets you build up what your potential target market size might be from the bottom up, as opposed to the way that we used to do it, and the way a lot of companies do it is they'll go to a market research service, and that service will say, okay, it's a $10 billion market. And they say, okay, I'm going to get 5% of that market, and then just build all of their return on investment and marketing spend assumptions on a top-down type of a model, while the bottom-up, as I described, it gives them a much more accurate idea of what they could potentially get a return on.
So then the next one is information. And I assume that they're taking the information that they've gathered from the previous 2 steps and doing something with it. So why don't you describe that?
Correct. And for example, when I worked at Hewlett Packard, or when I was consulting on a project a few years ago at Cisco, I would contact their market research department and ask them, in the case of one of those companies, they did not subscribe to any services market research. It's all hard products. Yet the group I was consulting with was responsible for their services. And I asked them if they could buy these add-on market research surveys. They already subscribed to about 80 of them. And the market research department at the corporate level says, yeah, we'll put it in our budget. And next August, we'll get the budget approved, and then maybe we'll probably buy it by next January. And this was like in November of that year, which meant it would be almost a year and a quarter after I needed to finish my market research study. I would actually get the information I needed in order to make an intelligent decision. So that's why I say, especially these large companies, have some flexibility in the market research services that you subscribe to, so that your product managers and your CFOs and your presidents can make informed decisions.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, too many, I've had in like the last several years, we've launched 5 products in our business, and 2 of them were miserable failures, and they were the first 2. And honestly, the approach that we used was just bad. And I think that's what people forget when they launch a product. It's not necessarily that the market didn't want it. It's that you didn't approach it the correct way. And you maybe marketed to the wrong people, which, is the next one here is customer. But I mean, if you market to the wrong customer, I'll give you a perfect example. We had a membership community that was called the Small Business Boot Camp, and couldn't understand at such a cheap rate with all the information that was inside, why we were having a hard time getting subscribers. And as we started talking to the customers, a lot of them referred to themselves as entrepreneurs, not small business owners. So, then it became, well, all right, they don't resonate. We changed it. We actually closed it down and then reopened it. Basically the same exact concept with a few things changed as the entrepreneur's water cooler, and it took off. It's just having the right wording and aiming at the right person. So, like your next letter here, C, for customer. I assume this is part of identifying the ideal customer for the product.
No, it's understanding what your customer wants to do.
Okay, so the innovation part.
Yes, the innovation part. There's a professor at Harvard wrote some books called Outcome-Based Innovation. And then a company up in San Francisco called Synergy did a book called Jobs to be Done. And my proposal is that understanding the outcome and/or understanding the job to be done, which is a little more granular than the outcome, is not granular enough. And that what you really need to understand is what your customer wants to do. Why do they want to do it? Where do they want to do it? When do they want to do it? How do they want to do it? What's stopping them from getting it done now? How important is whatever it is they want to get done is to them, and how satisfied are they with their current solution? So an example of that innovation over the decades is the caveman started writing with charcoal on the cave wall, and noticed that he couldn't take the cave wall to the next cave to show it to some of his friends. So he took a piece of the wall, maybe a piece of slate, and he would write on that. And then he got aggravated by the fact that his hands got dirty from holding a piece of charcoal. So they wrapped it in wood and called it a pencil. And then they noticed that the pencil kept wearing down and they have to go get another pencil someplace. So they started taking duck feathers or quills and somehow made it ink, and they had a fountain pen. And then someone said, that's kind of messy, especially when you spill the ink all over your desk. So the ballpoint pen was invented. And then along came the printing press and Gutenberg, and eventually the mechanical typewriter, the electric typewriter, dedicated word processing, and then a word processing program that ran on your personal computer. And that was after dedicated word processing ran on your mainframe or mini computer. So it's the same act of doing something that is getting the written word, or now drawings, portable so you can show it to somebody else. And through the millenniums, that innovation has occurred. So it's understanding who, what, when, why, how, what's standing in your way, how important it is, and how satisfied are you with the current solution. With that in mind, then you can build up what's called your customer persona. Who are they? Where do they live? Where do they get their information from? How do they describe their problem? And your example of the water cooler versus the small business, you probably would have found out if you'd gone out and did the interviews or the surveys, because they didn't call it those things then.
That's interesting, because what you just described pretty much aligns with my own definition of innovation, which is just providing things to people that they didn't know they needed. I mean, you used the example of the caveman, and he probably was like, oh, cool, I can write on the wall here. And then he said, I want to show somebody. Whoa, how do I do that? I can't, like you said, I can't carry the whole cave with me. So then he came up with the next step and the next step, and then, it evolved over time. Nobody realized that they were going to need a pen with ink encapsulated in a tube. No one would have ever thought of that. That's really interesting. So then you mentioned employees. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The aspect of that innovation is doing something faster or at better quality or at lower cost. And inherent in that is you can't go and ask people what it is that they want or what it is that they need. Steve Jobs famously used to say, you can't ask people what they need or what they want. And the reason for that is if they knew what they needed or wanted, then they have not only figured out that they have a problem, but they have also figured out the solution. So,
Yeah.
for example, there's a story that says Henry Ford could have gone out and asked people if they wanted an affordable car, and people would have responded, "No, I just want a faster horse." Where if he had just sat on the stoop of a bar in Dearborn, Michigan, where Ford Motor Company was born, and I was lived just north of there and grew up in Detroit, he would have noticed people whipping their horse trying to get through town faster, or pull the wagon that the horse is pulling to move their goods through town faster. Um, Another example of that Dave Packard from Hewlett Packard writes about in his book, The HP Way, is that his marketing people went out and asked people if they would like to have a color printer. And they responded no. But then he changed the question. Do you want a black and white printer that can also do color at no additional cost? And then the answer changed from no to yes. So you build some inherent bias into trying to ask your customer what they want or what they need. It's far better to ask them what is it that they do, why they do it, when they do it, where they do it, and so forth. And from that, you can innovate and come up with a better solution.
Yeah, it's the typical survey problem of how you ask the question. For years I worked for a restaurant delivery service as their CTO, and our CEO got really into net promoter score. And it has its interesting points, but I always used to say, you're going to get a different number depending on how you ask the question.
Right.
And one time I actually, he required all of the department heads to have a monthly survey, and it was part of we subscribed to a system called management action planning. And so like they would teach you how to run your department, setting goals, correct way, et cetera. It's pretty basic stuff. But they also had like something they called the vital factors. So like when you go to the doctor and they check your pulse and your blood pressure, check your weight. Those are kind of like the vital factors to see how are you doing? Are you healthy? Or are you not healthy? And we had as one of our vital factors, each department was our survey score. And so I kept telling him this and he wouldn't believe me. So one time I actually split the survey and changed the question. It was a 1-question survey. And I changed the question. On one survey, I got like 89% positive. And on the other survey, I got like 45% positive. And it was essentially asking the same thing, just in a different way. So, it kind of proves that point. But so you mentioned employees as the last part of the SPICE acronym. So how do employees play into this?
Well, they need to have the skill sets to be able to go out and observe what people are doing, be able to write an interview, and avoid the questions like, when did you stop beating your wife? To be able to write a survey in order and pick a sample that's representative of the personas that you're targeting. And each of the topics that I mentioned earlier in the product market strategy, in the process, in the accessing information that you need about your customer or your potential customer, all of those skill sets or competencies, you need to make sure that your employees have been trained professionally on how to do each of those things. Otherwise, they'll flounder around, make mistakes, similar to, like you just described earlier, where the question that you ask results in the answer that you get.
Yeah, that's extremely true. I mean, look at what they do with political polls. They change up the way a couple of words and it completely changes whether your answer is yes or no, or I agree or I disagree. It's just one of those things. What do you think are the top skill sets, like say the top 3 skill sets needed to help further product releases being successful?
But to take yourself out of the picture and observe what it is that the customer is doing. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was in Singapore speaking at a product management conference and had to go to India, in particular Bangalore, to train some Cisco product managers. And So I had to decide. So the job to be done was to go to India. Well, the things I needed to do is I needed to figure out how I'm going to get from the hotel to the airport. Am I going to take the train? Am I going to or get a cab? Am I going to use Uber? Am I going to use a ride sharing service? And then I had to decide based upon what those cost and how long those took when I needed to leave. And then I get to the airport. I walked into the airport, needed to find the ticket counter, and I didn't know where the ticket counter was. And if you've ever been to the Singapore airport, it's like going to a football stadium. You have no idea where to go. Uh, but my phone, my smartphone, knew what airline I was flying with. It knew that because of its GPS capabilities, I was at the airport, and a little arrow could have popped up and say, "Hey, go over here." But it didn't. So I asked somebody, and they pointed to the ticketing counter, which was halfway across the terminal. I got there. They said, "I'm sorry, we're not ticketing yet. Come back in 8 minutes." So, well, my phone could have told me, or an app could have told me that it was silly for me to get to the airport too early because I can't check in. Because my objective was to get through security and go into the business class lounge and have breakfast instead of eating in the hotel ahead of time. So then the attendant at the counter says, if you want to go to India, you have to show me your ticket leaving India. And I'm going, where did that come from? Nobody told me that. I said, well, I don't know when I'm leaving because I'm going there to teach in addition to Cisco, but also through Manipal University. I was going to give lectures at Philips and at Qualcomm and half a dozen other companies. And my schedule hasn't been firmed up over the next couple of weeks, so I don't know when I'm leaving. And she says, I'm sorry, you can't go to India unless you can prove you're going to leave India. And I said, trust me, I have absolutely no interest in staying in India. But they insisted to see a ticket. So I said, where can I get a ticket? And she said, well, go over there and pointed to Singapore Airlines and buy a ticket leaving India. So I go over to the Singapore Airlines ticket counter, and they don't fly to India. So I said, well, how do I get a ticket to India so I can leave it, go to India? How do I get a ticket to leave India to be able to go to India? And they said, go to the travel agency, which is in Terminal 2, and I think I was in Terminal 3. And I said, I'm not going to walk a couple miles just to get a ticket. So she said, well, you can buy it online. And I'll say, okay, fine. So I found a restaurant, went into the restaurant, and sat down, ordered breakfast, and then proceeded to try to sign in to the Wi-Fi at the Singapore airport. I had bought a universal SIM, but it wasn't working. And in order to sign in to the Wi-Fi, you have to get a text message with your one-use password. But I couldn't get a text message because the SIM doesn't work. And then they said, well, if you go to the information counter, which is at the other side of the terminal where I had started earlier, I can get a piece of paper with the Wi-Fi on it. So I got the piece of paper, came back to my cold breakfast, and decided I was going to sign in on my iPad instead of my iPhone, only to find that the user interface for signing into Wi-Fi on the iPad was different than the iPhone. So I had to climb up through the learning curve all over again. Finally, I was able to get online, was able to buy a ticket to get out of India so that I could go to India. Well, if the airport infrastructure, like on the Wi-Fi, along with the travel requirements of whatever country you're flying to, along with the airline that you're working with, if they would all get together and realize that all of their customers are going through the same things of what they're trying to do, trying to get to the airport on time, trying to find the ticket counter, trying to check in and so forth, they would solve that overall problem, probably with one travel app. So that's what I mean by understanding what it is that your customer wants to do at that granular level of every little thing to accomplish whatever that outcome is that they're trying to accomplish.
That's an interesting, that whole story. It makes me chuckle because I especially like the part about trying to sign in on your iPad because so many people don't bother to even look at the mobile version of their site. And you go and you're like, where's the button that I click submit with? And, it's like way off the screen. They've never bothered to have it move onto the screen. And worse, like when I was a developer, we made it a habit of like the default button was always, you could just hit enter and it would go. A lot of places don't do that. So there's no, until you give focus to the button, it doesn't do anything. So if it's off the screen, you can't give focus to it, and you're kind of stuck. My wife does it all the time. She'll be like in the airport and she'll say, why can't I get in here? And like, well, because they designed the screen really poorly. That's why you can't get in there. That's really interesting. I also find it kind of intriguing that you worked for Apple, because like Apple's kind of that company that, I mean, now obviously Google and Microsoft have become similar desired places to work. But what was it like working at Apple? Like how did you get in there? What was it like on a regular basis working there, et cetera?
Well, at the time I was recruited by Apple to come there was because I was a trained product manager from Hewlett Packard. And there were a lot of HP engineers and product managers that had made that jump, because product management, or as I prefer to call it, product success management, originated at Hewlett Packard, built on the brand management concept that Procter & Gamble had pioneered back in 1932. So one of the other nice things about Apple is that they had a set of values, which was somewhat modeled after the HP way and the values that Intel had at the time. And I was surprised to learn years later that our vice president of HR at Apple, she was married to Bob Noyce, one of the two co-founders of Intel. That was VP of HR at Intel at the same time. She was VP of HR at Apple. And she felt very strongly that the company have a set of values. So they set up a values committee in the late 1970s, and they wrote up a set of values. Things like teamwork, it's okay to fail, it's have empathy for your customer, demonstrate good management principles and follow good management, build quality products, that type of thing.
You mentioned product success management. You emphasize that, and I actually 100% agree with you. It reminds me of the story of the Buffalo Bills and how they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row and lost 4 years in a row. And after the fourth time, the coach said, I had the wrong goal. I told my players in the beginning we were going to go to the Super Bowl this season, and we did 4 times in a row. I probably should have told them we're going to win the Super Bowl. Maybe we would have won one of those 4 times. And it's the same thing. If all you're going to do is manage the product, you can manage a failed product. I mean, you want to make sure it's successful. That's actually was actually a really interesting point that you brought out there. What else would you like to tell me? I mean, what else do you specialize in?
Well, that's the primary thing is my books and my courses and my consulting in product success management. And if there's anything that I could do to help reduce the product failure rate, which I talked about earlier, those resources would be better available to pay employees more and or to spend more money on the great climate change challenge that humanity has around the world.
Interesting. I think that the way business has evolved, I'm actually a little interested to see what AI is going to do for all of this, because like we said, like if you're in, like right now, if you go, say, to Walmart and you're looking for what aisle is something on, for the most part, their system is set up that you can look in their app and you can find what aisle it's on. But what the heck good does it do you if that it's on aisle A2 if you don't know where aisle A2 is, And so it'd be nice to like be able to click on that and then have it put a line in the map of, here, follow this, and this is where this is how you're going to get there. And I can see that coming in the very near future. Actually, I think with AI, I got really interested in AI years back when I'm a chess player, and they got that AlphaZero chess computer system that it taught itself how to play chess. Like, they did not teach it the moves. It actually learned from playing over legal chess games. And the current, soon to be former world chess champion said he learned a lot from its play. And I think that's one of the things that people need to pay attention to going forward is, don't just throw AI at everything, but look at how it's helped, how, because I'm sure it's going to make some things more complicated. And so, you've got a kind of same process you went through here. You're going to have to make sure that people need it. That's something that they're going to use. You're going to need to make sure that you have a process that you can repeat over and over. I mean, everything you said, you can apply directly to that kind of situation. You don't just want to stick it into your old app and have it, release it as a new app. You want to make sure people are going to use that and it doesn't bog them down.
I suspect one of the issues that AI is going to run up against is similar to, asking people if they want a car. When in reality, the problem they're trying to solve is to get from place to place faster. It's it's not going to be able to discover what used to be called the unknown unknowns, because it is monitoring and reading all of the published data out there. And if there's no published data out there, then therefore there's no problem. So, for example, if Henry Ford had the internet available, and he was doing market research, and he searched on the keyword automobile to see how many other people were searching for automobile, he would have found that nobody was searching for automobiles because nobody thought that that thing existed. And as a result of that, there would be no market for automobiles, and he would not have gone into the Model T business. So the AI stuff can't answer questions for you or do stuff for you that something hasn't done previously. And it worries me. We've seen the weaponization of social media used by the Russians in 2016 election, and it was actually a paper given by a Russian general back in 2014 saying we have figured out how to weaponize social media such that key things like the QAnon rumors get posted, and negative stories have 10 times as many clicks as positive stories. And the companies supporting those clicks found that they can make more money by having these negative rumors surrounded. In fact, you can make a lot of money if you call yourself a company that's like Fox News, but when you're really not have any news, you just have these negative clicks so that your ratings go up and you can make more money off of your advertisers. So
it's something I noticed on Huffington Post. They used to be kind of neutral headlines, and now the headlines will be like, because they're very left leaning, it'll be like, right wing force messes up something, and it's like a very negative headline to get people to click it and read through,
Well, just like the what's David Pecker's company with the supposed newspaper that's in at the grocery store checkout lines.
Yeah.
What's the paper in New York that Murdoch owns? Was the New York Post? They just found that if they write these types of headlines, people are addicted to these kinds of negative stories, and they buy those publications. And to some extent, 20, 30, 40% of people believe it. And then they circulate them around with the Jewish space lasers, for example.
Well, like that, I've told this story on this show before, but I have a friend who worked for a media company, and they wanted to kind of prove that social media is really a poor way to get the news out. It's just a terrible way. And so during the 2016 elections, a lot of people were, all up in arms because Donald Trump was the nominee for the Republican Party. And, there were a lot of things that came out about him that were very, very negative. And so I can remember like people saying, oh, he's going to get arrested for this. He's going to get arrested for that. And so his company put together a little test, and they released on social media an article that was titled something like, Trump indicted on, blah, blah, blah charges. And then if you clicked through to the article literally said, I'm glad you're here. You're actually reading the article. This article is here to teach you about the bias of headlines and how we can attract you to this article based off of the headline, but what you read actually hasn't happened, and as to our knowledge, best of our knowledge, it's not going to happen. But yet people would reshare that and reshare that and reshare that and reshare that, and then argue that, no, I know he got indicted. He got indicted. I read it. Well, no, you read a headline that said it, but you have no clue what's behind the headline unless you click it and read it. And I think it's interesting that, so many, you're right. So many people believed it. Probably half the people believed what they saw there. And I guess in a way that's kind of the dangers of the written word too, is, you can spin it any way you want and put out a message that, on the if you dig into it, it's probably not true, but on the surface, it appears true. So that's kind of interesting. Well, this has been a great conversation, but we're kind of running out of time. So why don't you tell people where they can find you and like how to reach you if they need assistance with successful product management and that sort of thing?
Yeah, just go to my website, which is spicecatalyst.com, or send me an email at dave@spicecatalyst.com. On my website, there are links to the books that you mentioned that I've written that are available on Amazon, and links to descriptions of each of the courses that I have available.
Awesome. Well, I really do appreciate the time you spent with us. This has been another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. We hope you've had a great time learning everything you need to know to stay ahead of the technology curve. And remember to be curious, be updated on all the latest trends, and show them who's the boss. Until next time, we'll be back with plenty more techie tips and tricks so you can stay on top of your game. See